Hello everyone. Seeing as it is currently Nisan, Pesach is coming, and so I thought we would pause Pirkei Avot and launch into a special Pesach shir. So that's what we're going to do. This is based on the Or Somayach Haggadah, Or Somayach Yeshiva, right? Not Or Somayach, the commentator from back in Europe. And this is based on Rabbi Uziel Milevsky's Shiurim, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. He was a lecturer at Or Somayach for some time, and his Talmidim effectively compiled some of his Shiurim into a Haggadah, and we're enriched by it. I certainly am. Really enjoyed what he had to say about Karpas and others, but we'll be focusing on Karpas tonight. So just as a quick introduction, right, the Seder has 15 steps. We start with Kaddish, right? We do Kiddush, and then we wash our hands with our Bracha, and then we eat Karpas. And Karpas is an entire step of the Seder. Now, we are entitled to ask, what is this about? Why are we're taking a vegetable and we're dipping it into some liquid, right? There are different minhagim, but generally there is some kind of vegetable into salt water. Why do we do that? This seems like such a strange thing to do. I mean, imagine going to somebody's house on a Friday night, and you're generally familiar with Shabbat, and so they say Kiddush, they wash their hands with the bracha, and then they go back, and before they eat the bread, they dip some vegetable into salt water. That's very weird. That would for sure provoke a question, or even if you didn't feel comfortable provoking the question, you'd certainly be wondering to yourself what on earth was going on. And speaking of which, why do we have to do it now? Why can't we just do it later? Just wait until we're about to have matzah, just do it then, and then everyone's, that's at least in some form of Seder, but here, we're eating this vegetable, and then we're going into Magid, right? And then 45 minutes, an hour, 2.5, 3 hours later, you're eating matzah. What's the deal? Why are we doing this now? What's it meant to symbolize? And so, one of the comments, what Rabbi Uziel Milevsky says in this Haggadah is, the Karpas serves as an appetizer. It is meant to whet one's appetite. Right? What's an appetizer? The purpose of an appetizer is it's this kind of small serving portion of food that a person gets before the entree. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to make a person hungrier, enjoy the entree more. The hungrier a person is, the more they'll enjoy the food that gets served later, right? And so with Karpas, we eat the Karpas to whet our appetite for the matzah that's to come, right? Eating matzah is, as far as I understand, the only mitzvah min haTorah, right? The only biblical commandment and requirement to eat food. So if you're biblically commanded to eat something, then it should be enjoyable. Right? The Torah is meant should be an enjoyable experience. And so when we're going to eat the matzah, we would like it to be an enjoyable experience. The hungrier we are, the more it'll enjoy, right? The matzah can't taste like anything. It's literally just flour and water, nothing else. And so if you're hungrier, you'll enjoy it more. That's that. But again, I mean, that's bizarre. Like, why is it so important to enjoy matzah, right? If we were to ask, name some really Jewish activities, right? A biblical mitzvah, to enjoy the eating of the matzah. What? That would strike us as bizarre, and it is bizarre. So why are we including this extra step of the Seder, of the Haggadah, to enjoy matzah that we'll be eating in some hopefully not too distant future? What's going on there? And so the idea here that's important to discuss, because again, it's hard to understand why we're putting such emphasis on being super hungry for the matzah, right? The hunger is the best cook. Why is this so important? And we'll get to that in a moment. But here's another question. Again, why do we dip the vegetable? What's one of the answers that Chazal gives? It's in order to provoke the children to ask questions. Again, imagine on a regular Friday night, you sit down with your children, you say Kiddush, you wash your hands, and you come to the table and they're expecting to hear you say Hamotzi, and here you are, you take this vegetable and you dip it into salt water. The kids would go crazy, what are you doing? Because one was Abba, what's the story? Say Hamotzi, let's get this meal started. Why are you giving us this whole vegetable salt water stuff? So why do they do that? And so just as we see that Karpas serves as an appetizer, a physical appetizer to make one hungrier, this is also meant to serve as an intellectual appetizer. We are eating Karpas in order to provoke the children to ask questions. That sounds well, what a great answer. The only problem is you haven't answered the question, because again, imagine the process. You take the karpas, you dip it into salt water. Your kid's like, oh, Dad, why are you dipping this vegetable into salt water? And your answer is, I did it so you could ask that very question. The kid would then say, okay, so I've asked the question, so why are you dipping it into salt water? Right? You haven't answered the question. How is you provoking a question an answer to my question of why you're doing that? Right? That's another idea. And so Rabbi Mulaski says, it's a powerful idea, is these things are actually all connected in terms of the karpas being a physical appetizer. We eat the karpas in order to make us hungrier for the matzah. Because how are you going to enjoy the matzah if you're hungry? If you're not hungry, then you're not going to enjoy the food that you eat, and you're meant to enjoy you're supposed to experience the mitzvah. Similarly, right before Magid, right, which Karpas precedes right before Yachatz, Karpas Yachatz and then Magid, right, very quickly you'll probably get there within a minute or two. What happens is you're supposed to intellectually stimulate your children. If a child is sitting there, he doesn't care about the Haggadah, he's not interested in the story of the Exodus, then what are you doing? You're just going to be rambling on. He's just going to be waiting, checking his watch until he finally gets his meal, right? And he's going to suffer through this whole Haggadah. But if you at least get the child excited and curious and wondering, like, what is this? So, like, what is going on? Then he'll be engaged. Perhaps an analogy is, imagine if you're reading a mystery novel, right? Or watching a mystery movie, whatever it is. It's a whodunit, right? Someone was murdered. Who's the murderer? And you don't care about the characters, you don't really care about who did it, you don't care about anyone, you're just not interested. Movie's gonna suck. It doesn't matter if it's the best screenwriting, it was a great story. I don't care. I don't care about the characters. I don't care about anything that you're wanting me to care about. That's the problem here. It doesn't matter how good the storytelling is. If you're telling a story to someone who is not interested, then what are you doing? And so karpas here serves not only to whet one's appetite for the matzah, it's meant to whet your children's appetite for the story of the Haggadah. That is part of the Seder experience. And how does this ultimately build into it? Right? When Pesach is zman cherutenu, it is the time of our freedom. In order to appreciate freedom, as we've seen with food, as we've seen with a story, there has to be some kind of a lack. You have to stir someone up. If you take an immigrant who came out of the USSR, right? They finally got out of Soviet Russia, or some other, say, autocratic regime in the Middle East or wherever, and they come to Canada, the United States, England, whatever, they come in, and they're just like, they're the first generation, right? They just escaped. They know what it's like, they appreciate their freedom, and then they have their kids, and the kids are very unlikely to appreciate. They've maybe heard stories from their parents, but it's not the same first-person experience. They don't care as much because they didn't experience the pain of what it was like to live in that other country, under that foreign government. So that's what we're trying to do here. Pesach is meant to stir us, right? What do we do? We start with the bad and we end with the good. We have to experience slavery to appreciate freedom. That was the ultimate goal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu sending us into Egypt. We would never appreciate what it was like to be free if we never experienced Mitzrayim first and the terrible slavery that we had to endure. And so we see again, there's this kind of like threefold message of what Karpas is triggering. Now I'm going to say something. Rabbi Uziel Malevsky does not say this, but I think he certainly seems to be alluding to it. Is if you look at Karpas and the three parts that follow after, excluding Yachatz, right? So you have Karpas, then you have Yachatz, then you go into Magid. What happens in Magid, right? Three things. The first thing is ha lachma anya, right? This bread of poverty, this poor bread, that's the matzah. We eat karpas to increase our appetite for the matzah. That's part one. What happens right after Magid? Manishtana. We've provoked the children's questions. Karpas is meant to whet the intellectual curiosity of the child. Right? So that's part two. Then what's the ultimate goal? The next sentence is, Avadim hayinu leFaro b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Paro in Egypt. Amazing. Karpas here is a precursor to the first three paragraphs of Magid. It's meant to stir appetite for matzah. It's meant to stir our children's appetite for intellectual curiosity. And it's meant to hopefully help us appreciate what it was like to be slaves in Egypt, so we could appreciate our freedom that we are celebrating on Pesach. We'll end it there, and we'll see you on the Chag or after.